The courtroom was silent, almost unnaturally so. Every eye in the room was fixed on the woman standing before the judge. Her hands trembled ever so slightly, but her posture remained resolute. Outside, the city hummed with its usual indifference, but here, within these walls, time had slowed. The air felt heavy, as though every secret the family had buried for decades hovered in the corners, waiting to be uncovered. Pause for suspense. The final verdict was about to be read, but before it came, one truth would echo louder than any power, wealth, or influence. The voice of the overlooked could not be silenced forever. Marianne had arrived at the mansion as a teenager, timid and polite, carrying nothing but a sense of hope and the determination to earn a living. The Harrington estate, a sprawling structure perched on the city's most exclusive avenue, seemed to shimmer with wealth. Its high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and perfectly manicured gardens were meant to impress. The Harrington family was legendary in the city, not just for their fortune, but for the unspoken control they wielded over the world around them. Everyone knew their name, few dared to challenge it. Marianne knew this when she accepted the job as a maid. At first, life was routine, almost comforting in its rhythm. She learned which glass belonged to which family member, which rooms were off-limits, and which conversations she could safely overhear. The Harringtons, Samuel, the patriarch, ambitious and exacting, and Victoria, his wife, elegant but icy, were demanding yet predictable. Their son, Edward, was a young man of charm and arrogance, a combination that often left Marianne on edge. She was careful, always respectful, always quiet. In the family's eyes, she was invisible, a shadow in the grand halls of their empire. But what they did not realize was that shadows often see more than they are meant to. Over the years, small things began to unsettle her. A whispered argument in the library that seemed too sharp for polite disagreement. Documents left unattended on the desk, filled with numbers that didn't quite add up. A hint of tension in Victoria's smile when she mentioned family trust funds. And above all, the subtle way Samuel Harrington dismissed and threatened employees without consequence, leaving them fearful and compliant. Marianne absorbed it all quietly, storing pieces of a puzzle that she would later assemble in ways no one expected. The incident that ignited the chain of events was almost laughably mundane. A misplaced ledger, a minor discrepancy in accounts that had been brushed off as a clerical error. But Marianne had noticed. She had carefully documented the irregularities, taking photographs and keeping copies in secret. She realized then that the Harringtons' power was built not just on wealth, but on the assumption that those beneath them would remain silent. That assumption would become their undoing. Rumors circulated for years about the family, allegations of embezzlement, mistreatment of staff, and even manipulation of business partners. Yet nothing had ever been proven. The Harrington name was untouchable, until Marianne, quietly determined, stepped forward. It began with a single letter sent to a local investigative journalist, an anonymous tip revealing discrepancies that could not be ignored. The journalist's inquiries quickly escalated to legal scrutiny. The Harringtons attempted to dismiss it, to intimidate anyone who dared speak. But Marianne had prepared for this moment with a patience that only the overlooked can possess. She had evidence, dates, photographs, and recollections that mapped every instance of deceit, concealment, and exploitation. The courtroom became the arena where decades of power would be tested against truth. The high ceilings and polished wood, the rows of onlookers, the somber expressions of jurors, all became the backdrop for an unfolding drama that few could have anticipated. Marianne entered the courtroom each day with a quiet resolve, her appearance unassuming but her mind sharp, every detail she would reveal calculated and precise. The Harringtons arrived in contrast, impeccably dressed, radiating confidence, certain that the weight of their name would shield them from consequence. But as Marianne began to speak, the illusion started to crumble. Dramatic emphasis. She spoke slowly, deliberately, recounting her years in service, the patterns of control, the hidden manipulations that had gone unnoticed. She described the casual cruelty, the hushes and warnings, the fear that had silenced so many others. Each word landed with precision. Evidence that had once seemed insignificant, the ledger, the photographs, the notes, now built a narrative impossible to ignore. There were pauses in her voice, moments when the courtroom collectively held its breath, sensing the magnitude of what was being revealed. The family's attempts to rebut her claims were predictable but faltering. Their lawyers cited character, loyalty, and internal family misunderstandings. Yet Marianne's calm, unwavering testimony cut through every defense. The witnesses she had convinced to speak corroborated her story, revealing patterns that spanned years. Each revelation chipped away at the veneer of infallibility the Harringtons had maintained. The more they resisted, the more apparent it became that their power had never been absolute. It had relied entirely on the silence of those they oppressed. At the height of the trial, the shocking moment arrived. Marianne revealed a series of internal documents, carefully preserved, that showed deliberate financial misconduct. Every transaction, every hidden account, every false claim was laid bare. The courtroom, usually a place of measured decorum, seemed to pause in collective disbelief. Even the most loyal Harrington allies could not reconcile the evidence with the reputation that had long shielded them. It was a quiet devastation, unfolding with a gravity that needed no dramatics. Pause for suspense. In that instant, the unthinkable had occurred. The name that had commanded respect and fear was now associated with deceit and betrayal. The judge, impartial yet solemn, absorbed the evidence. Jurors, too, wrestled with the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Outside the courtroom, reporters whispered and cameras flashed, but inside, there was a stillness, a recognition that justice had been measured, and it had arrived in the most unexpected form. Marianne, once a silent observer, had become the architect of accountability. Her courage had transformed the narrative from one of fear and power into a testament to truth and perseverance. As the verdict was read, the weight of decades of control dissolved. The Harringtons faced penalties and public scrutiny that would linger for years. Their empire, meticulously maintained, was fractured by the evidence of their own actions. They had underestimated a single voice, the quiet presence they had ignored, and in doing so, had allowed the very foundation of their influence to crumble. In the aftermath, Marianne returned to a life that was quieter but no less purposeful. She had endured the scrutiny and the subtle intimidation that came with standing against a powerful family. But her resolve had proven that moral courage could transcend social hierarchies. The Harringtons' downfall served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that privilege and power could not indefinitely shield wrongdoing. And in the echoes of the courtroom, one truth remained indelible. Those who are silenced, when they choose to speak, have a resonance that wealth and status cannot contain. Time moved on as it always does. The mansion stood empty for months, its grandeur diminished, its halls haunted by the memory of accountability. Marianne carried the lessons with her, that justice is often patient, that courage need not be loud to be effective, and that the quiet witness to wrongdoing can become the instrument of profound change. The Harrington name, once synonymous with dominance, would now serve as a silent warning to others who assumed immunity. In the final reflection, there was no triumph in arrogance, no delight in retribution. There was only the calm recognition of truth and the subtle but enduring power of integrity. Marianne had not sought fame, nor had she wished for vengeance. She had simply done what she had quietly known she must: bear witness, preserve evidence, and speak when the time was right. And in that silence, after the gavel fell, one thought lingered in the stillness of the courtroom and beyond. Even the mightiest walls can crumble under the weight of truth, and the smallest voice, when it chooses, can alter the course of history. Pause. Justice, at last, had been measured, not with spectacle, but with courage. And so, the maid's voice, long overlooked, became the instrument that reminded the world: no name is untouchable, and no truth can remain buried forever.